All right, let's start, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So as you all know, we have just began the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. We've just entered the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. It's always very shocking every year to be reminded that these are actually the most beloved days of the year to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which the Prophet ﷺ says that there are no deeds that are more beloved to Allah than those that are done during the days of Dhul Hijjah, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And it's very sometimes surprising for people to hear that, because we typically put a lot of emphasis on Ramadan, but subhanAllah, the most beloved and most special, most rewarded days of the year are actually not in Ramadan. They're in Dhul Hijjah, and we've just began those days. We've just entered those days. As we know, obviously the most sacred nights are in Ramadan, but the days are now. So subhanAllah, whatever you do during these days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the deeds that we do in Dhul Hijjah the most. They are the most beloved to Allah. And what are some of the deeds that we are encouraged to do during these days? Obviously the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahu Akbar, a lot of remembrance, a lot of increasing in our dhikr. Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamdu, huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, istighfar. We're told by the Prophet ﷺ that anyone who says a lot of istighfar, anyone who seeks forgiveness, repents excessively, 3 things happen for that person. They are saved from difficulty. They are saved from anxiety. And they are provided for from places they never imagined. So these are all, I would say, the 3 things we all want, right? We want help from any difficulty. We definitely want to be saved from the things that give us anxiety and that we're afraid of. And at the same time, we want provision. We want provision, even if we can't imagine where it comes from, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can provide. And that is what comes out of excessive istighfar. We spoke about the power of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah is a treasure from the treasures of Jannah, and it is also a cure for 99 ailments, the least of which is stress. So we talked about the deeper meaning of la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and why we can imagine why it relieves so much pressure and stress, because we recognize that we're not the ones that control or change anything. That is only Allah who can do that. That we cannot be the savior. That we cannot be the one at the steering wheel, because we actually aren't. It's an illusion. Many people have an illusion of control, and that seemingly makes them feel safe. But it's actually an illusion, because number one, we are not actually at the steering wheel of our life. Allah is at the steering wheel of our life. And Allah is at the steering wheel of everyone's life. He is the one, and I say this to remind you and myself, not just logically, but remind the heart that Allah is at the steering wheel of our children's life. Because many of us are parents, and one of the things that as a parent is that you fear for your kids. You worry for your kids. You have a certain vision of what's best for your kids. Yes? And as parents, it's very, very difficult to not impose that all the time, right? And so it's also, I think, if we look at ourselves as parents and we look at the root of most of our anxiety, anyone want to tell me where it's rooted? It's usually related to our children. Yes? Fear of the unknown. But once you become a parent, where is most of your anxiety related to? Your children. And that's natural, right? So to say and to remind ourselves that Allah is the one at the steering wheel of your child's life, it's actually very profound, because so many of us as parents, we want to protect our kids. But sometimes the way that we try to protect our kids is through control. Yeah? Y'all wouldn't have any idea about that, right? And the issue with control is ultimately it is to manage anxiety. Yeah? We want to feel a sense of control. And why does a person become controlling? What's at the root of being controlling? It's fear. It's fear of what am I going to do if this outcome happens or that outcome doesn't happen. And we're afraid of that. I even explained to you that it's a fear of our own emotions. It's a fear of vulnerability. When you say you're afraid of the unknown, what you're actually saying is you're afraid to be vulnerable. You're afraid of putting down your guard. You're afraid of something scratching you. You're afraid of something getting close enough to you that it hurts you. That is the root. That's what's behind controlling behavior. What's behind controlling behavior, if you take off all the layers and all the armor of controlling behavior, it is a person who's afraid. It is a person who has anxiety and fear of what may come. And the fear that if I put my guard down, if I don't control this situation, if I don't control every aspect of this situation, I might get hurt. I might get disappointed. In other words, I might have to be vulnerable. In other words, I might have to feel something. And I'm going to take this back to that root because we're afraid to feel. Many of us are afraid to feel. We're afraid to feel our emotions. We want to be protected from having to feel things. And so there's all these different ways. And if you look at psychology, there's all these different ways to avoid emotion, to avoid having to feel. It's really very basic. You can ask a licensed therapist. It's really very basic. What we're doing is we don't know how to interact with our own emotions. We don't know how to process our own emotions. We don't know how to digest, how to face our own emotions. And actually that becomes the root cause of dysfunction. It becomes the root cause of illness. It becomes the root cause of problems, whether it's inside of you, outside of you, or between you and others. It becomes the root cause. So when you go back and you look at something like the need to feel control, because I know a lot of us struggle with that. I know a lot of our parents struggled with that, especially when you are in survival mode. Now let's go back to that, because many of us grew up with parents who were in survival mode. Do you know why that is? Well, because many of our parents were immigrants, or many of our parents might have even been refugees, and they came from trauma. They came from parents who came from trauma. They came from parents who came from poverty. They came from parents who came from war. They came from parents who came from, who were refugees themselves. They came from trauma, and their parents came from trauma, and their parents came from trauma. You understand? And so many of us grew up with parents who were in survival mode. Now, when you're in survival mode, as we talked about, you are simply not using your prefrontal cortex. The part of the human being that makes us higher creatures than animals is simply the prefrontal cortex. There are parts of our brain that are animalistic, right? Animals can also have fear. Animals also have a fear response. Animals also can feel hunger. Animals also can feel thirst. Animals have that. But what animals don't have is a prefrontal cortex. And so what happens is, simply put, when we are in survival mode, we are not using our prefrontal cortex. It's essentially offline. And so we are in our, what's called the limbic system, which is just survive this, right? And so many of us, you have to learn survival skills. You guys ever seen like these YouTube videos about how to survive in the wilderness, right? Weirdos, some of them, man. Like there's this one guy that my kids watch, and he was like having snakes bite him, and weird. Like, why are you doing this? Like on video, so he can show how to like survive. Okay, that's a little wild. But the point is that we learn survival skills psychologically as well. And one of those is you better be in control. Because the moment you lose control, you will not be safe. You gotta stay holding on to that steering wheel. And it's like we're holding onto it and our hands are bleeding of how tight we're holding onto it. And things will happen to try to make us let go, and we are not gonna let go. And the harder you hold on, the more it hurts you, the more you break your hand, the more you crash, the more you hurt the people around you. But ultimately, it is a survival mechanism to try to avoid the emotion that you are afraid of and the outcome that you're afraid of. And so when we say something like La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, we are actually letting go of the steering wheel. Not so that it can crash. No. We are giving it to Allah. That car never crashes. That car never crashes if you give it to Allah. That's what La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah does. And that's why it's a cure for 99 ailments, the least of them is stress. Because you're saying that, no, I'm not in control. Nothing happens, nothing changes, nothing transforms. There is no power, there's no strength except by Allah. It is not by me. It is not by my so-called control of the situation. It's not by my so-called control of my children. It is not by my power. It is not by my money. It is not by my status. It is only by Allah that anything happens. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? And that is such an important realization. It will cure you of so much anxiety. So much anxiety. Because at the end of the day, you realize that whatever outcome there is, if Allah carries you through it, you will be okay. You will be okay. That is where tawakkul fits into this. Because trust in Allah is what gives you the ability to say, even if it doesn't work out the way I've envisioned, because we all have a plan, right? Are you guys one of those that like 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan? Yeah, are we 5-year planners over here? I remember one time someone asked me that. I just looked at them like they were crazy. Because I think it's wild. I mean, for me, I'm like, what? 5-year plan? She said it works. That's great. That's great. Make a plan. But realize that it's not your plan that is the best plan, right? So we can make plans, but recognize we are making plans blindfolded. Do we recognize that? That's the point. It's like we're blindfolded making the plan. Fine, make it. you know, God be with you, but realize that you are blindfolded. And so the problem is that we become very attached to our plan. No. It has to go my plan. And I'm not even just talking about macro. I'm not just talking about 5 years. I'm talking about the plan for today. You know what I mean? The plan for today has to go like this. And if it does not go like this, things are not going to be okay. This attachment to it has to go the way I say it has to go, because otherwise the world will end. You understand what I'm talking about? And so the attachment to our vision and the attachment to our plan is actually rooted in anxiety. It's in fear. It's in, as you said, sister, fear of the unknown. No, if it doesn't work this way, I'm terrified of what might come. And maybe I can't handle it. Maybe I'll be unsafe. Maybe I'm going to have to feel grief or disappointment or fear. You know, and it's interesting because anxiety and fear are not the same thing. Do you know this? We think of them as the same thing. But in a sense, anxiety is actually what happens when you refuse to feel your fear. You don't want to feel afraid. You don't want, see, there are normal human emotions. Have you seen Inside Out? So you have an idea. There are normal human emotions. All of them were created by Allah, and therefore they're not a mistake. They're not an oversight. They're not like a mistake in the design. Sadness, anger, fear, joy, disgust, etc., right? But when we look at the emotion of fear, it serves a purpose. But when something goes wrong in that system, it turns to anxiety, right? Part 2 then had anxiety in there. Well, obviously this is written by psychologists. But the point that I'm making is that fear is not what you should fear. Because fear serves a purpose. And when you don't allow it to be felt and then serve that purpose, it can turn into anxiety. And anxiety, interestingly enough, it's like, it becomes, see, fear, what's the difference? Fear, you're afraid of a specific thing, right? You're afraid of a specific thing with fear. Okay, I'm afraid that something bad will happen to my spouse. I'm afraid that something bad will happen to my child. I'm afraid that we won't have enough money. So it's a specific thing you're afraid of. If you don't deal with that, right? You don't deal with it. Either you suppress it or you do something else. You're not dealing with it. It's not serving its purpose. It can turn into anxiety, which is just generalized. A person who has anxiety is not just afraid of one specific thing. It's almost as if everything is unsafe. Do you understand? It's not just anymore a focused thing that I'm afraid of, but it's just I'm generally feel that I am always unsafe. The world is unsafe. One of the roots of anxiety comes when, one example that Dr. Gabor Mate discussed is that when you think about a child who is afraid, what does the child do when they're afraid? A child who can't talk, say. But how? How do they communicate it? They cry, right? That's the design of Allah. The child who's afraid cries. Now, why is the child designed to cry? To get security from the caretaker, yes? So the child, the system goes like this. Child feels fear. Child cries out for help, security, safety. And presumably, caretaker comes in response and makes the child feel safe, right? That's the system as it's supposed to work. But when the child is afraid and cries out and never gets that response, never gets that safety, maybe they are, there's a philosophy that you should let children cry so you don't spoil them. or there's a philosophy of let them cry themselves to sleep, or whatever it is. So when the child learns that when they're afraid, there is no safety, then that fear turns to generalized anxiety because nowhere is safe. You understand? If I am afraid and then I get safety, then I realize, okay, the world is safe. There's safety. Safety exists. Safety exists. Because I don't, I got that safety when I was scared. But imagine that you didn't. Now, where is safety? There is no safety. Safety doesn't exist. And that is generalized anxiety. That's anxiety. Anxiety is just like nothing is safe. So I'm always in that high alert of fight or flight, survival. Nothing's safe. Nowhere's safe. Does that make sense? Esma, did you want to say something? Okay, so she's, yes. Yeah, so she was saying it reminded her of a book called The Gift of Fear. And the premise of the book is that fear actually can save your life. That because fear is designed as a protective measure. For example, if you're going somewhere, imagine you're walking towards a cliff. Yeah. Presumably you're gonna feel fear. And that fear is put in you to tell you, turn around. Don't go close to the cliff. So fear is a protective measure, and that's absolutely right. The issue is, I heard this thing and it's so heartbreaking, but I'm going to share it with you. Basically, it's so triggering. But what happens is that when a child, for example, is uncomfortable with an adult, maybe it's a relative, someone who makes them uncomfortable. Maybe they've done something. Maybe they behave in a way that's uncomfortable. Now that child has in their design an alarm system that goes off. And this is designed by Allah, right? The alarm system says, I'm not comfortable with that adult. So maybe they won't want to hug that adult. They won't want to go to the adult's house. They won't want to be alone with that adult, right? But that adult is a relative, for example. So they tell the parent, I'm not comfortable with that adult. Maybe uncle or cousin or whatever. Yeah. Family friend, whatever. I'm not comfortable. And the parent says, don't be silly. Don't be silly. That's your uncle. That's your cousin. That's our longtime friend. And the parent shuts down that natural instinct and tells the child, basically, that instinct is wrong. Turn it off. Turn it off because you're wrong. Because the parent is the one telling the child right and wrong, right? So the parent is teaching the child, turn it off. And then maybe they go and something bad happens to them. So now what have they learned? Well, number one, they've learned the world is not safe. That their own parent, who their job is to keep them safe, did not keep them safe. And number three, they've learned not to trust themselves. Because they've been told again and again, you're being silly. Or that's not valid. Don't listen. Don't listen to yourself. And when a child grows up not listening to that natural design, it's an alarm system that Allah put in you. It's an alarm system that's designed in you. You have to listen to it. But if you grow up being told to shut it off and not to listen to it, then what happens is that you can be taken advantage of much more easily. You can be abused. So one thing also that they say is that abusers, they pick out certain people who won't, push back, people who won't speak up, people who won't, who will stay quiet. So this is also, as parents, we have to be very careful with that, right? But it's very common. It's very common. So going back to the relinquishing of, and I don't say relinquishing of control because we are not in control, but it's an illusion. So it's relinquishing the illusion of control and the idea that I have to be at the steering wheel and it has to go my way or else we'll crash. And that's not the case, because we are blindfolded and Allah knows better. Allah knows. And so learning to trust Allah's plan, even when we have our own plan, make your plan, but understand that your plan is not the best plan. Allah's plan is the best plan. Understand? So I have a plan. Great. Maybe that's even my intention is this is part of my worship. This is me tying my camel. But don't ever think that your plan is the best plan. We are so blind. We know nothing of the unseen. Our knowledge is so limited. So it's understanding that. And then understanding it's Allah at the steering wheel, not me. And it's Allah who's going to protect my child, not me. And it's Allah who's going to protect my own self and not me. So we do our part. We do our work. We do our plans. We tie our camel. But we do not become attached to those things. We do not become so attached to the plan that we can't see another way or let it go when necessary. Reroute, take a new route. It's okay. That type of inflexibility is a sign of deep, deep, unresolved anxiety and fear, maybe even trauma. So having the ability to be flexible and to understand that I can be totally wrong, right? Allah tells us in the Quran, عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It might be that you hate something and it's good for you. You hate this plan, but it's actually good for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. And it could be that you love something. You're so attached to something. Whether that's the plan for your kids, the plan for your life, the way this day is supposed to go, the way next week's supposed to go, the way this next 5 years is supposed to go, whatever it is, a particular person, a particular outcome. You might love something, and it could be bad for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And it's bad for you. You can love something, and it's still bad for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah knows, and you do not know.